Welcome to the Ironwood Gym. Push-ups. Alright? I can't tell you how many guys I've heard say, yeah, I can do 100 push-ups. No, you can't. No. You can't do 100 push-ups. Not in one set. Maybe in 10 sets spread over 2 days. Maybe. But you can't do 100 push-ups. The women came back from volleyball practice, tennis practice, wherever, soccer practice. Coach made us do 300 push-ups today. And you probably did 0. Okay. This is to kind of, I guess, set the record straight on what a push-up actually is. All right. A lot of people say that anything that they're on the floor and they're bending their arms just a little bit with face down and they are moving a little bit, they call it a push-up. No, your push-up needs to have, you need to get your chest to the floor, or at least almost to the floor, depending upon how you're built. You need to keep your abs tight and stiff. Okay, your arms should be chest level, not above your head, and done correctly. Doing hundreds of push-ups as punishment is not helping anything. It's teaching athletes that they can do push-ups incorrectly and count it as a push-up. That's all it's doing. All right, it is not productive. It is not probably a good way of punishing athletes. I can think of far better ways. And it's actually probably taking away from their practice. So then when they go back to practice, they can't practice appropriately. On the guys' side of things, they like to always brag and throw out those huge numbers that they can do. But if you did 3 sets of 15 good quality push-ups, you'd probably be struggling. And that only comes up to 45 and you're breaking it up into 3 sets. So I'm just going to go over some of the basic mechanics of push-ups, what you should be looking for, and anything less than that just isn't a push-up. So let's get started. All right, so a few things that you should be looking at when you're doing a push-up. We're going to hop down here on the floor in just a second. But the first thing is hand placement, okay? Putting your hands up above your face or eye level or even shoulder level is not correct. You want your hands at chest level, okay? Not way down here, not out here in front, not super wide, chest level, and just a little bit wider than shoulder width, okay? Having it too far out in front, it prevents you from getting down into a full range of motion. Same thing out wide, it puts too much stress on your shoulders. And we want to get our triceps involved to a greater degree. Also out wide really decreases the range of motion. So if we bring our hands down, now it brings our elbows down into our sides more, allowing us to get more tricep involvement with it. It also allows us to go through a more appropriate range of motion and keeps our shoulders in a healthier position or in a safer position throughout the movement. Okay, the next thing, it would be your abs. A lot of times you'll see it. I'm going to show these things on the floor here in just a second. I just want to hit it before we hop down there. A lot of times you'll see people sag their hips down towards the floor, not keeping their abs locked in. We want our abs to be pulled in, tucked in, almost like you're doing a crunch throughout the entire movement. So you're crunching, you're bracing, you're creating a nice rigid torso throughout the entire movement. The other thing you'll see is they'll bridge their hips up. So this will be harder to see on this video, but they'll bridge their hips up in the air. Okay, at the same time, when they do that, they usually put their hands out in front more. Both incorrect, which I've already talked about hand placement, but having those hips way up in the air is almost turning this into almost like an incline press. But when they do it, they don't go through a full range of motion, meaning they're not getting very much out of the push-up. So now, let's hop down on the floor, let's take a look at some of these things and what a push-up doesn't look like and what it should look like. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to cover some of the errors or the pitfalls of push-up that kind of makes the push-up not a push-up. So the first thing is the girl push-up. We need to abandon that. You know, if you want to have girls that are 9 years old and 10 years old do push-ups and have them go from their knees, fine. But getting into high school, they really need to abandon that. And by the time they're in college, they're actually considered to be women. So let's abandon the girl push-up. So really, everyone should be doing push-ups on their feet and on their hands. The second thing would be something that I see commonly among the females, but also males that are heavier, is that they'll line up to do a push-up with their hands too wide, too far out in front of their face, and then they'll bridge their hips up way in the air. Okay? So hips are way up here, their hands are out in front of their face, and then they just do a little bit with their arms. Okay? Those are not push-ups. Okay, we need to stop that. That's not a push-up. The next thing is, again, looking at the hips, is the basically opposite of what I just showed, and people will let their hips sag to the floor. So they're actually making contact with the floor with their abs or their belly or their hips. The only things that should touch the floor when you're doing a push-up correctly are, of course, your feet and your hands, but your chest. That's it. You shouldn't be making contact with your belly or your hips. So what that looks like, what you commonly see, is that they'll be here and then they go to do the push-up, and as they bend their arms, they let their hips sag to the floor. Okay. Again, just like the previous one, not a push-up. Next is just simply having their hands out way too wide and most likely letting their elbows go straight out to the side and not getting good range of motion while doing that. So on that one, hands out too wide, too far out behind the shoulders, and then when they do their push-up, they're just doing a partial range of motion, so they're really not getting a lot out of it. The last one that I'm going to show is what you typically see when you have a guy tell you he can do 100 push-ups or multiple sets of 50 push-ups. And really what he's doing is he's just doing a little bit instead of actually full range of motion work. So he'll be in an okay position, but then when he goes to do the push-up, he does this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those aren't push-ups. I don't even know if it was a quarter of a rep. So we do want to go through a good range of motion. So what we want to look at, doing push-ups correctly, is the first thing is hand position. Your hands should be a little bit outside shoulder width, okay, not a long ways, just barely outside shoulder width, maybe a little bit wider, not a big deal, but you don't want it inside your shoulders. When you, the other thing is where should your hands be? Your hands should be about level with your chest, okay, or in line with your chest, not up around your shoulders. Bring those hands down more about chest level. From there, the next thing we want to look at is the hips. Okay, the hips should be straight. So we want to actually be crunching our abs like a crunch or even a front bridge or a plank, in which I'm crunching and pulling my abs tight. I want to hold that throughout the set, along with my hips being locked in. So you actually want to squeeze your glutes as well at the same time you're crunching your abs. That'll create a nice straight line and a nice rigid torso. And then the final thing is actually the execution of the push-up, in which you want your elbows not to go out to the side, you want your elbows to go back. So it actually should be at an angle down from your shoulders. It doesn't necessarily need to be any specific angle, but it shouldn't be turning out to the side here, or even out as you go down. You don't want those elbows to flare out. You want to keep them almost tucked in a little bit. So here's what that should look like. Okay, I'm taking my hand placement just outside shoulder width. Okay, my fingers are actually going straight forward. You could turn them out a little bit if you need to. I'm going to get into the push-up position. I'm going to crunch my abs. My glutes are going to be squeezed. As I lower myself, the only thing that should touch the floor is my chest, and my chest should be in line with my hands. Those are what push-ups should look like. All right, so those were push-ups. All right, so if you're one of those guys bragging that you can do 100, 200 push-ups, please stop and start doing real push-ups. If you're a sport coach, if you're a volleyball coach or soccer coach that's making your athletes do hundreds of arm bends with their hands, their hips way up in the air and their hands way out in the front of the face, I can't even call it a push-up. It's just called a slight arm bend with hips up in the air. Stop doing that. It's not helping anything. Start doing real push-ups that your athletes or that you or whoever this may concern can get something out of. If you want to get something out of a push-up, do a real actual push-up. Do sets and reps of something that will actually make a difference and that can actually benefit you. Push-ups are a great exercise when they're done correctly. I'm going to put out another video, okay, on different variations of the push-up that'll allow you to get different things out of different movement patterns or whatever that we're doing, and then show a little bit more, go into how to plan for push-ups and how to work those into your program. That'll be coming up soon. Keep an eye out for it. But until next time, always be in the pursuit of strength.